Okay, so hello again, everyone. Charles Banfield here with another Karate Canucks conversation. And for those of you who watched previous episodes of this podcast, you'll note that today's discussion will feature a couple of firsts in terms of the topic being covered and the fact that today's guest is the first non-Canadian that's been invited to participate. Normally, I like to stay in my lane and focus on Canadian martial artists, but you'll soon understand why today is a bit of an exception. So today it's my pleasure to be joined by Sensei and Chieftain Bernard Leddy. Mr. Leddy has had a lifelong love for the martial arts, starting with Shotokan Karate at the age of 8 years old. Over the years, he would also explore Judo and later Aikido, in which he would earn a third-degree black belt and run a successful Aikido dojo for over 10 years. At age 28, he started what would be a more than 18-year career as a prison officer, and he spent times in riot teams as a hostage negotiator and as a therapy officer. And this experience enabled him to gain deep insights into human behavior across a variety of settings. After suffering a significant work-related injury, he was no longer able to effectively train in and teach Aikido. So he sampled a variety of martial arts options before settling on Bataireacht. And you can correct me later if I'm mispronouncing that. Which is the Gaelic word for Irish stick fighting. As fate would have it, he started training under a gentleman named Glen Doyle, who's a Canadian, and he was also the last of the hereditary stick fighting masters of the Doyle family system of Irish stick fighting, which is also known as Dance of the Whiskey Stick. So the Doyle stick fighting system differs from other forms of Irish stick fighting in that it is two-handed, close quarter system, as opposed to a one-handed, longer-range, fencing-like style. And this system was first brought to North America when Mr. Maurice Doyle settled in Newfoundland back in the early 1800s. And while most other styles of Irish stick fighting eventually faded from existence back in Ireland, the Doyle family kept its system alive in Newfoundland, where it evolved for about 10 generations. In 1998, Glen Doyle was granted permission by his father, Gregory, to teach their system outside of the family. And in 2012, or thereabouts, Mr. Doyle decided to retire from instructing. In 2022, he named Mr. Leddy as chieftain and head of the Doyle system worldwide, which currently has schools in Ireland, the UK, the US, and I believe there's also one in Egypt, according to the website, anyway.
Yes, there is, and Prague.
Sorry, and Prague. Okay, yeah.
Germany and yeah.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, I must have missed
and Taiwan. We're all over the place. You can't get rid of us.
All over the place. Excellent. So I'm very happy to welcome Chieftain Leddy to the podcast today, and just want to take the quick opportunity to thank you for agreeing to share your thoughts and experiences on our podcast.
Thanks, Charles. I'm very glad to be here, sir.
Excellent. So before we start our discussion, I just want to set a little context for everybody. So for those who know, this channel is primarily focused on exploring Canada's martial arts history through stories of prominent Canadian martial artists. And despite the name, it's not just about karate. I've had the pleasure of speaking with many people who have a variety of martial arts backgrounds. Now, that said, most of these discussions have been focused around systems that originated in the Orient, but there have been exceptions. So, some of these include Bill Wolfe, who spoke about British, American, and Canadian military close quarters combat systems. There was also Christian Niles about historic European martial arts, also known as HEMA. And even more recently with George Lepine about the Northern Plains indigenous combat system known as Okichita. So the Doyle family system of Irish stick fighting is particularly fascinating for me because while I'm interested in learning about different cultural stick fighting traditions from around the world, I'm from Newfoundland. I was born there. I lived there for the first 25 years of my life. However, like I think most people back home, I had no idea that this system existed, let alone that this martial art had been incubated in my home province for the better part of 200 years, which is longer than modern karate has been around and many other modern martial arts. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this discussion with our guest today. So with all that said, Chieftain Leddy, I'll start this conversation like I typically do, cover some basic details about your background and so on. So can you share with us a little more background on where you're from, where you grew up, and what prompted you to start your martial arts journey?
Well, I'm originally from County Waterford, a village called Kill, which is, if you've heard of Waterford Glass, we're about 15 miles from there. I spent my first 18 years there. And then when I was 18, I went to the UK. I started my karate training in Kill Village, which is a very small village, but not so much nowadays because like everything, it seems to grow. Everything changes, as they say. And started training there, got into judo in Ireland, loved judo, loved karate. Then I moved to the UK when I was 18 to find work. And that's when I developed Aikido. A lot of my influence in early martial arts was the Bruce Lee films, the Jackie Chan films, which probably everybody says when they come on here. But, Kung Fu, the series with David Carradine was a massive influence, even though you look at it now and you go, oh, that's terrible. But at the time, there was very few resources on martial arts, and so it was one of the great things to get hold of. I'd first heard of Bataireacht from my grandfather when I was a kid, but I again like everything that's not on TV, that's sort of historically local to us. We always dismiss it because it's not as good as Bruce Lee or it's not as good as Jackie Chan. It's just how could it be? Um, when I moved to the UK, I got into Aikido, which I really enjoyed. I trained under Mrs. Rosloft in Luton, and I then trained under Sensei Keizawa who was in Japan, but he was living in Luton at the time, which was a great eye opener. I got into uh, Wing Chun when Steven Seagal came along, and I realized that Aikido and Wing Chun mixed in very well. Um, I then got a point in my life where I realized that people were talking, and I was supposed to be teaching people self-defense, but I'd been very lucky in that I hadn't had uh, many uses for martial arts training in the sense that I've never had to defend myself. So I thought the best place to go would be into prison and fight people who knew how to fight, which is a real eye-opener because they don't fight like we do. So it gave me that whole kind of aspect of reality based, what I see as protecting and defensive. Um, and it gave me a whole new aspect on people's psychology and how violence interacts with psychology and how people react to violence. And like you said, I'd done 18 and a half years there. When I busted my knee, I was running to an alarm bell. I fell on a stairwell and the lip of the stairwell went underneath my kneecap and destroyed my right knee.
Mm.
So two operations later, I couldn't bend my knee as properly as I could. So a lot of the Aikido stuff, like Shiko, which is the knee walking stuff, was out the window. So I put on a lot of weight because I wasn't training as much. I started looking at ways of losing weight. And of course, you go to the gym, and I find gyms very boring. Firstly, because it's a very solo thing. But secondly, you can't really punch anybody in the mouth at the gym. You get in trouble for it. So what I did was I started looking around for martial arts, and I went on a martial arts journey and kind of looking at other cultures, like Japanese culture, Filipino culture, as all these different forms, Kung Fu, Chinese culture, and went down these roads, but they were very similar to stuff I'd done before. So one night I thought, well, what about Irish culture? What about Irish martial arts? And this is when I started looking at what Irish martial arts were around and really thinking there wasn't any. And that's when I remembered Bataireacht, my granddad spoke about it. And then I found Glen Doyle. Um, Mr. Doyle was a very welcoming, invited me over. So I maxed out my credit cards and off I went. And trained with him. And it started a friendship. We've been friends now for many years. He's also my teacher. And I'm very lucky to be one of the few people that still have contact with him. But every now and then I'll get a video. Look at this. Have I shown you this? Is this is part of another technique or something that we've done in the past? So I'm always a student. To me, it's if you stop learning and think you know it all, then that's the time you're going to find out you don't. So I came back to Ireland after I got injured out of the job. I got pensioned out. I thought, well, let's move to Ireland. And when I came to Ireland, my goal, realizing actually it's an Irish martial art that's not been recognized in the world. Let's bring it back to Ireland. So luckily, because of the Newfie connection, it wasn't for Newfoundland, it wouldn't have survived. Primarily because of the isolation, probably because of the Irish culture there. I mean, Newfie's got one of the, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, it's got one of the only Gaeltachts, which is an Irish-speaking area outside of Ireland. So there's a preservation there to keep Irish culture, and that's what saved it, you know. So yeah, that's my martial arts journey so far.
So far, yeah. Um, so, um, so the martial arts that you sort of explored, or were training in, you mentioned Aikido, you mentioned Wing Chun. You're kind of spending a bit of time there. Those were you started with those before you went into working in the prisons, or oh, you did? Okay, so
Yeah, before I started working in prisons, that's what I got into. But
and
like I
and
said,
how would you say that those and I don't want to pick on just those because you did judo beforehand and so on. Like the
yeah.
training that you had, how did that kind of did you feel as though it prepared you for the job inside the walls, or were there gaps in there that you had to fill in other ways?
The beauty of it was because the speed. So when we train all the time, someone's throwing a punch at you all the time. You're training, people are hitting you, for fun. When it happens in reality, it slows down. My first encounter at the prison was someone trying to stab me in the throat with a craft knife. And I could see it coming a mile away. It was so slow that I felt like I could go downstairs, put the kettle on, make a cup of tea, come back and block it. It came in, and it's because of training. You're training your mind, you're training your body. So you see things before, and I'm not saying like Jedi mind trick or anything, but you see things as they're starting to develop. So you're seeing a punch, and it's like the guy's written you a letter and said, I'm going to throw this punch at you at this time,
Yeah.
and it slows down. So it really helped me. It saved my life. I think about 4 times it saved my life, where I nearly got stabbed. Where it hadn't been for the Aikido training in particular, because it allowed you to do moves that were very similar to the control and restraint that we'd use, but it also allowed me to control the weapon and control the guy attacking me. So yeah, the training is, train if you're going to go into the police or anything like that, do a martial art, train in any martial art, find the martial art's good for you and train it because it will really help you, you know.
So and you mentioned that your I guess first instructor was Sensei Loft, is what you said.
Yeah, Rosloft. It was a when I went to England, my father, who was living in at the time, he'd gone over there to work because there was nothing in Ireland at the time. We were in a massive recession. So he got into Aikido and he loved it. So I went along thinking, "Oh, I want to do kickboxing. I want to be like Jean-Claude Van Damme, the fat version." But when we got there, he taught us along to an Aikido club, and Sensei Lofts is a very she's not a big lady, very small lady, and she was doing locks and stuff, and I was going, oh yeah, yes, that's nice, very nice. I probably want to stick around like I did. And she caught me one day and threw me where I didn't have a chance of I couldn't see it coming, had complete control over me, and I went, if she can do that to me, then I can do that. I can do something bigger than me, because she's got full control of me. This is how it works. And then I met my first week there. There was a sensei who was actually working in Vauxhall, called Sensei Keizawa, and he was from Japan. He taught in the Hombu dojo, and he was working there for General Motors vehicles. And he was a completely different kettle of fish. It was like he was destroying people. His techniques were very strong. Um, and it's very kind of samurai mentality, which I took with me and still hold a little bit of that because he taught me the whole idea of the sort of samurai attitude. You know, if you touch me, you're going to go, you're going to fall into pieces. I'm going to destroy you. But you know, equally, I'll walk away if we can walk away. You know, which is what martial arts are about. So yeah, it was a great journey. You know, I'm so lucky to have met these wonderful people. You know, very privileged.
Yeah. And again, what was it that drew, was it the person that drew you into the Aikido, or was it, did you have an interest in it before you sort of sought it out? Because, you know, you were talking about Bruce Lee and David Carradine
Yeah,
and Van
I
Damme,
mean,
and Aikido is very different from what you'd see, you know,
exactly.
even Steven Seagal stuff is not, well, it's Aikido, I guess, but it's not really Aikido. So,
It's not, and it's very much a. I didn't seek out Aikido. It was kind of because when we went to move with my dad, who was living in England. He was doing Aikido, so we had to do Aikido. It was like, you know. But when I'd done it for the first couple of months, I wanted to go back to karate. I wanted to go to kickboxing, and then I realized the sort of power of it and the movements. It's very similar to judo in certain aspects, although the throws are very different. Um, it seemed um, it seemed very magical, which sounds mad, but it seemed like you could throw someone without any effort. And it kind of I got hooked on it, the whole idea of the using the energy and stuff. And it was Hombu Aikido mixed in with sort of English Aikido. Because England at the time you had the Hombu dojo in England, and this is going to be a bad reference. People are going to write to now and go, "Oh, that's not right." But you had different clubs that started and different styles. So the style that Mrs. Lofts originally taught came from a gentleman called Pat Stratford, who was from the north of England, who trained, I think it was in Holland. So you had that influence, but then the Japanese Aikido got in, which and there's a big difference. There was a big difference, and I don't think so much now. But at the time, it was a bit different. But yeah, it was a real eye opener.
so it was your father who got you into that then. He kind of
Yeah,
encouraged you. Yeah.
it's my roof. You're under my roof. You were doing this. So it's like, and then not being able to drive, being one of the few 18-year-olds in the world who couldn't drive, you kind of like you were stuck with that, or I was waiting 2 hours to get a bus. So it was like, nah, let's just go along. You know, we did something, but when I get to drive, I'll do what I want. But I was hooked by then. I was absolutely hooked. You know,
Yeah.
it's really happy memories. You know, really great memories and great people through the years. You know, I'm still friends with some of them now, even though we don't train together. So yeah, it's a wonderful time.
Yeah. And I'm curious also about, you know, you said there was the, I guess the Hombu um, version, if you will, of the martial art, but you said there was also English Aikido. So you had different influences. When you say that, do you mean the techniques were performed differently, or there's a different training methodology or different mindset? Like, what do you mean there was differences?
There was a difference in the techniques. I mean, the kind of English the same techniques just done slightly differently. And they would be influenced by the teacher, obviously. And going back to the people in Holland, I can't remember where it was. I think it was Holland. They would they're or it's actually Belgium. Sorry, I did beg your pardon. It was Belgium. So you go and train in Belgium, come back, and he would develop his own style because it's people in isolation when they're training they become slightly different. And then when Kay came from the Hombu, it was very different. Again, it was much more dynamic. It was very aggressive Aikido. It was, like the samurai kind of influence. It was really beautiful to watch, and very beautiful to do. I've seen him like put a Nikyo lock on somebody, and he's like drilling him into the floor. It's just like completely different to the English. Oh, it's a lovely little movement. It's just this massive whip round, and suddenly that person's lying on their ass, going, "Oh my God, kill me now!" It was just fantastic to watch and fantastic to do. I was very, very lucky to be in that position to train with him. One of the highlights of my life. But anyway, I've been at Aikido for about 20 years now, so I haven't done Aikido in 20 years, so now it's all about the Bataireacht.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure I don't want to assume too much, but I would assume if I were to assume, I would assume that you've carried some of the mindset, some of the training that you've had into, into the Baccarat. Um,
Well, the mindset of the stick fighter is very similar to the mindset of the Japanese warrior. The words are different, but the mentality is there's an honor-based system within Bataireacht. Like we have what called the Ten Commandments and the Eight Wises, and these are laid down within the family rules of what you do in a fight and what you don't do. And one of the things that I, I really love, one of the sayings is always leave the table with hunger in your stomach, meaning that if you get into a fight with someone and you put them down, that's it. You walk away unless they get up and come back after you because you're leaving the table hungry. You're not hitting them and beating them and just carrying on when they're on the ground. If they're down, they're down, and that's it. You walk away. Um, and that's the thing with Japanese martial arts. You fight someone, you put them down. If they get up, it's a different thing. But if they're on the ground, they stay on the ground. You know. And that whole mindset, the whole kind of samurai mindset, is kind of linked within the Irish Celtic warrior mindset. The whole kind of thing of controlling and like Bataireacht goes back, and people go on about the history of Bataireacht, and there's always arguments, there's always historians. Always sort of armchair historians. I'm neither. I'm not a historian. I have a lovely armchair, but I'm not I'm not going to sit and lecture. But there are links to traditional Celtic swordwork going back to the Celts, which would have been way back in history. And that's originally the Celtic warriors would train with the shillelagh because it was a ready weapon. It was there that you're not going to give your 12-year-old the family sword because metal and steel and iron and bronze was really expensive.
Mhm.
So initially the first weapon would have been the shillelagh. But again, um, there are hints to it in history, but nothing definite. So I can't say that definitely and say this is what happened. I'm just going to say what, the ideas and stuff that we have that come from it. The system itself is just so technical in bits. Like there's so much in the system that I can't believe. For people say, "Oh, it's only a couple hundred years old." Well, actually, no, it's much older because it's a fully rounded system. But anyway, I digress again.
Yeah, well, actually, I was looking to dig into that a little bit because one of the questions I had prepared to ask is around the history of stick fighting, Irish stick fighting, that is, because a lot of different cultures have their own traditions, right? For stick fighting, because like you said, sticks are ubiquitous unless you're in the desert or in the Arctic somewhere. There's not many trees. You can always find a stick otherwise, and you know the question I was going to ask you was it always there, or was it a response to, suppression of weaponry by, whoever the colonizer was, whether it was the British or the Vikings or or whatever. Well, I don't know much about the Viking invasion, if you will, but if they were ones to suppress the locals having any weapons and whatever, but does it predate those times? Because the Vikings were about 1,000 years ago or so, and the English were 600 years ago ish, I guess, or maybe a little bit
Yeah,
longer than that.
yeah, 800 years.
Yeah, 800. There you go. So it predates all of that. It's something that's been around. Yeah, and
Well,
and
sorry.
no, I was going to say that and add on to that. Like there seems to be. I've been watching some videos around how these shillelaghs are crafted. There's a specific type of wood and there's a specific shape with a ball on the end, which makes it a little bit of a club as well. Yeah, so there you go. Um, and there's this, there's a tradition around it, which I'm sure would have evolved over the years. It wouldn't have been, oh, here's a stick. It was like, no, I'm going to seek out a certain thing, so or a certain type of material to make it out of. So if you can touch on that maybe a little bit around like the history of the origins of stick fighting, and then how it was kept alive for the most part over the years until I guess recently. I guess in recent, within the last 100 or so years, that it's kind of died out a bit.
Okay. Well, the earliest record that I could find is a tribe called the Harry, Harii, and they were based in East Germany, and Western France, and they go back to the Celtic times. They were involved in the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, where the Romans were wiped out by the
Yep.
Germanic tribes. And one of their weapons, they were a small tribe, so they fought differently. A lot of tribes would all line up, and then they would all charge in and they knock the crap out of each other. But what the Harry would do, because they're so small, is they would use different tactics. And one of the tactics is they used to use coal powder or mix in a darkness to blacken themselves completely up. And they would attack at night. And one of the weapons they used was a shillelagh. They would say it's a club, and a system of using it. And it was recorded that they would come in when the Germanic tribes surrounded the Romans. The main Celtic tribes or Germanic tribes were fighting during the day, and then the Harry would appear at night. And imagine like stood there waiting for them to come out, and then suddenly you just see a pair of eyes coming out of the darkness, and they attack and they withdraw. So, and the idea was like the shillelagh is a really strong weapon. It can take a real beating. So if it hit the armor, it might dent the armor, which means after a while the armor is going to get very uncomfortable. So they're going to start taking it off and make them easier to kill. And it slowly will kill you. I mean, there's no two ways about that. Uh, and that's kind of the one of the earliest records. Now, it's very hard to prove anything in Ireland because we didn't record a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff recorded by mouth, by word of mouth.
Mhm.
We're a very oral tradition until the monks came along and started writing stuff down. But instead, I was in a church, the cathedral in Kilkenny, and there's a grave there, a sarcophagus, and on the side is a guy holding a curvy looking stick, which can only assume is a shillelagh. And this is going back maybe 1,000 years, maybe more. Um, when the Normans came in, I mean, the Irish had a long history of fighting, you know. So the Celtic tribes would fight each other. That's our downfall. Rather than uniting and fighting whoever's coming in, we'd all be fighting each other and fighting whoever, everybody and anybody, you know. Um, Interesting, the song Danny Boy is actually from the Celtic Times, and it's about the cattle raids. So people would, have heard the song Danny Boy,
Mhm.
oh Danny Boy, and this is about when summer comes, and they would raid cattle during the summertime and fight during the summertime, and wars and stuff would all happen after the harvest was planted and the summer was, ready to get the harvest in. Then we go to war. So we can eat during the winter, so we'll fight, and if we die, then we don't have to worry about eating during the winter. A digression, I know, going off and stick fighting. When the Normans came into Ireland, the Vikings came in. The Vikings didn't really conquer Ireland; they conquered parts of it. There were more settlers here.
Yeah.
You had like Dublin and Waterford, like Waterford, Port Lariga, but Waterford is the river that goes into Waterford, so the Vikings call it Waterford.
Yep.
And Dublin's actually Ballata Clear, which means the passageway of the Clear, the small island, the passageway to go out to the small island there. But Dublin, it means Black Pool, which is what the Vikings called it. So it's got two different names. So not like a lot of places in Ireland has many names. Um, so when the Vikings came, the Battle of Clontarf in 1045, Brian Bruce sent them out, but they still had a lot of Vikings in Ireland. They were a pain. They had major settlements here, but they never really ruled the whole country. When the Normans came in, they came in and they swept through Ireland. They still had areas of Ireland that were swore loyalty to the Normans. But you had the thing where they say, look, you can't carry weapons. All these people are walking around with weapons. You can't carry weapons. So what the Irish did was they picked up the shillelagh. So I can imagine this Norman lord sat in his castle looking out, going, all these people with walking sticks, going, man, they got some real walking problems, these people in Ireland, man. I don't know what's wrong with their legs. They're all walking sticks. Um, in Ireland, you had a law called Brehon law, and Brehon law was the original law. And this was the roots of justice. Basically, if someone killed your cow, then they had to give you the money or another cow. It was a very basic law, but a very just law.
Yeah.
When the English came in, the Irish refused to go under English law, um, primarily because the Irish had no access to law. Because obviously Irish, you were seen less than a dog. So the shillelagh was a way of people getting justice. So if someone crossed you, the shillelagh was your way of going down and getting your land back, getting whatever money they owed you out of them. And it's seen as factions, gangs. In what John W. Hurley calls this is the Shillelagh Law. We had two versions of the Shillelagh Law. Shillelagh Law was the rule of fighting. It was like an honor system, a chivalric system. So people would fight for fun. So you'd hear about people fighting at fairs, at weddings, at funerals. Well, basically these were for fun. You would turn up. You would, if you had uneven numbers, you would split up. So you might be going down with your best friend. You might be fighting on the other side from your best friend, but it would be fun. So you'd all be like splitting heads and splitting lips and breaking knees and stuff. It'd all be a good laugh. You'd have a pint afterwards and talk about the techniques. Oh, that was really good. I love when you done that and you busted my lip open. Yeah, good fun. Have a pint. And that was the way. The other version of Sharia law was the law of the form of justice or seeking justice or vengeance. So if someone had crossed you or offended you or hurt you, that was a completely different thing. That fight was a fight to the death. And these have happened all over Ireland. You'll hear of them. There's a famous one in Ballybunion. I think it was 6,000 people were on the field fighting, you know, because your factions and factions, people look at factions today as like gangs of thugs and youths. And we have, unfortunately, in the world, a massive gang problem all around the world. I think in every country's got gang problems. But at the time, factions go back to the Celts, and the faction would be, I live in a place called Monakill. I have Kilmacarroll across the road, just another townland. If there was trouble, the two of us would get together and we'd protect the townland. And you'll see this in Ireland because you have small stone forts, which were where you put your cattle at night. So you put your cattle in there, and then all the neighbors would take turns guarding it. And this was the faction. So the faction would be a family, but it would be a neighbors, it'd be your community.
Yeah.
So everyone would chip in to help out. And so the fact when people say factions, they only think of bad things. But actually, in the old days, if someone crossed you, you would go to the faction, look, I need help. And yeah, we'll all come down, we'll all get a shillelaghs, and we'll go kick the crap out of them. And that was their only form of justice because they couldn't go to the law courts because they were Irish. They were seen as the only times the courts get anything to do with the Irish is when they were sending them off to Australia or hanging them, or shooting them. This continued up until the famine. There were various things that kind of historical things that happened where there was a modernization in the Irish forces to fight the British. So they were looking at the Shirley's old hat, you know. They wanted to modernize them as a modern fighting force. But when the famine came along, it wiped all of that out. Interesting enough, though, a lot of Irish went to Newfoundland and went to New York, and we have the gangs of New York, where the Irish would go to New York, America. They would be despised because they're all coming in seen as unfortunately we see people who come from other countries who need help as scum and everything else, but these people come to try and survive. So the Irish would go in and face this controversy, and they'd all gel together. And so you'd have the gangs in New York thing, which is a true story. The Dead Rabbits were a true gang.
Yeah.
Tammany Hall, they ran them. It's all great film. Cameron Diaz's accent is awful, but anyway, be here listening, Cameron. Pack it in. Anyway, they got into the whole thing about protecting each other. And again, it's just back to being justice. They've just come from a country that was hating them and killing them without any access to law. And so when they go to America, they'd all band together, look after each other. And that's what happened. After the famine, a lot, because we went from a population of 8 million down to 4 million in a period of 3 to 4 years. And this is where a lot of stick fighting kind of died out. I mean, if you can't eat, you can't fight.
Yeah.
If you've got nothing in your stomach and you've got to find food for your kids, then you're just going to get it the quickest way you can. And it still touches Ireland today. Irish population, the first is over 5 million now, the first time since the famine. And that was sort of 1845 to 1847. So when, it's still very painful in Irish memory, but a lot of stick fighting kind of continued on the background. And my granddad was telling me when he was a young boy, this would have been in the 20s, he was in Cavan and he seen two men fighting and one, well, through shillelaghs, and one killed the other one, caught him behind the ear and killed him. But it was seen as, okay, well, he deserved that. It's like very much, he messed around and found out. And this is what happened. So some of it preserved. I mean, when I came over, I started talking about stick fighting, and people would go, "Oh, yes, Sons of the Road. He's a stick fighter." And I go, "Where is he?" "Oh, he died in the 50s." And you would get this, "Oh, so and so, yeah, he was a two-handed stick fighter. Where is he? Oh, where is he? No, he died in the 60s. He died in house fire. Oh, he drank himself to death." and all this kind of historical stuff. So a lot of it died out. Um, and as well, it was seen, from the Irish sort of rebellion forces. It's old hat. We don't want that. We want to get guns. We want to, we want to join together. We want to fight. We want to fight sort of more modern because we've got to get rid of the English. So a lot of Irish looked down on it, and the church absolutely hated it. Absolutely hated it. There's some great stories, and if you're interested, there's a site called Onducas. That's AN and then DUCAS, and it's a folklore collection, and it collects stories of everything. School children went to their great grandparents and parents and collected stories from old people. And there's a lot of stories about stick fighting and a lot of stories about churches. They didn't like stick fighting very much at all. There's some great stories. There's a story about when they went into the church, the priest was standing at the door to check them for shillelaghs. So what they would do is they put the shillelagh down their trouser leg. And so that then when it came to sitting down, all these legs would be stuck out because the shillelagh's down the leg, and where a priest grabbed the shillelagh, went out to the middle of the fight, cleared a few of them out of it, and sent them home to stop them fighting because he was a stick fighter by trade.
Hmm.
Uh, People had grown up, and it's the image of it being passed just from father to son, but it was father and to daughters as well because they had to defend themselves. Yeah. So the history of Irish stick is fascinating. It's a lovely long history, and I won't bore you with any more.
I'd say I'm definitely not bored. I'm a sponge for this kind of stuff. But, yeah, I think you're probably safe. I don't know if Cameron Diaz is going to even ever see this, so
You never know.
you never know. Yeah, I think you're safe there. So, what was there anything in particular that drew you to the Doyle family style? Because you said you were looking, after you had kind of retired from, if you will, teaching Aikido and the like, and you were looking for something else, and you looked into the Irish traditions. Was there a specific reason why you kind of went down the Doyle route, or was it just like a chance that you kind of found them first?
Uh, a bit of both. I mean, I found Glen Doyle. The thing is, I'm a bit of a nerd, a bit of a martial arts nerd, probably like everybody watching this. So I researched him. I went onto every forum I could find, and he was the only one who seemed to have a legitimate claim in that sense. He
Hmm.
could trace his family history back. He would talk about his his great 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 uncle who came over from Ireland, had to leave Ireland in a hurry and came to Newfoundland, and brought it with him. So it is it's an amazing story, and it's very uh, rings true with a lot of people in the world, a lot of the history of Irish people around the world. So yeah, that's what drew me to it. Um, and he's a phenomenal martial artist. I mean, you look at his history in martial arts; it's stunning. It's outstanding. Not only did he also produced wrote a few films back in the day, a few martial arts films, which I can't remember any of at the moment, but he wrote a few of those and they got made. A very kind of clever man.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, in Canada, you and I were chatting about this before. In Canada, he's not really well known for this, but he was Elvis Stoiko's kung fu instructor as well. And yeah, that's an interesting connection there also. But so when you started training with him and you were seeking him out, and when you say you came over to train with him, that was in Canada, it was in Toronto area, you said?
yeah, yeah. I came out to Toronto for a week and I spent 4 days training with him. And I went back and I continued training then incidentally online and stuff. And then he would send me stuff mostly online. We'd have chats and he would give me information and stuff of what I was lacking or in my training. And it became a real, when you have to seek something out, it becomes much more interesting and more valuable than when something's handed to you, which
Right.
it's like in martial arts, you go out and you find more and more stuff, and it's always very intriguing. And you remember stuff that you have to find and learn. And it's been a fantastic journey so far. It's just been, an eye-opening journey. Um, Looking at stuff within the system, and we have what are called Rinka, which the system's nickname. is called the Rink an Bahana Ishkabaha, which means the dance to the whiskey stick. Dance to the whiskey stick actually comes from the Doyles protecting whiskey stills back in the day. When the English came over, they started producing their own whiskey, and what they would do is, and the Irish have a native whiskey called pochine, which is made from potatoes. And this stuff is potent. I mean, if you get the right batch, you can see in the dark. I mean, it's that strong. You take it, you have no issues with seeing in the dark, you know. And what they would do is they would send gangs or factions around to destroy the stills. So of course, like because they wanted the locals to buy their whiskey, and of course the locals like we haven't got two pennies to rub together. You know, you're taking all of our land, you're taking all of our money. Well, what the hell do you want? You know. So what they would do is they would have the Doyles would protect the stills because it was a two-handed system. Stills are normally hidden in, and if you see any Boccian stills are always hidden away in the mountainside somewhere. So these guys would protect it. It was a close-in system, and it worked very efficiently. So the locals called it the Rincan Bahanish the dance of the whiskey stick. It also meant like when they were training, and the Irish culture with training was very, it was done in schools. They're called hedge schools. The Irish weren't given education. They had to create hedge schools where they would hide away in a building and they would teach the children, educate the children because they weren't allowed by law to teach them. Um, so the hedge schools would be another place where stick fighting would be taught. So part depending on the style of stick fighting. There's very different styles of Irish stick fighting. And so the hedge schools would have been the main place where the education would have been gone. So if someone went past and seen these people out doing what are called the rinka, the dances, they would ask, what are they? And someone say, oh, that's the Rinkan Bahanish Kabata. So they get their Irish English dictionary out and they go, oh, dance to the whiskey stick. Oh, it's like Morris dancing. And Morris dancing is traditional English dancing and just ringing bells and hitting balloons and crap. Not dismiss it. It's good for you if you enjoy it. But these guys would then walk away thinking it's just local dancing, but it's actually training, training for violence. So long, beautiful history. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the history of the stick, you have different sticks. One of the sticks you'd have, and you'll see, which is called the cudgel or the kippeen. So the traditional name is the kippeen. So the kippeen would have been a like a short handle weapon where people, because it was seen that every Irishman had to carry a stick, a shillelagh or a cudgel. There's no system left of the cudgel, unfortunately. But again, it's not a very practical weapon, which sounds really mad, but you can't carry that into a bank. You walk into a bank with this, they're going to arrest you. You're not going to get to the tills. The traditional shillelagh, which this is my one, this is the Baton Solace, the stick of light, and it enlightens people when I hit them with it. It basically this is a smooth training weapon, as you can see. There are no thorns on it. This
Yes.
is this is a proper fighting stick, and this has the thorns here.
Right. So is
And
the was it the buckthorn it was called? The what's the wood
well,
it's traditionally made from?
it's well traditionally it's blackthorn, but it was made from
Blackthorn.
any local wood.
Okay.
So you had areas where you wouldn't have so much blackthorn. So you would use holly. You would use this here. This is another shillelagh, very different type of shillelagh. We call this one Gandalf's shillelagh. It's not really. But this is made from what's called a furze bush, which is a green plant that blossoms in some beautiful yellow little flowers. Very spiky plant, but these are the roots of it going underneath. So they would cut them and use them. And this is an antique. This is a beauty. So it would be any wood that was in the area. You tend to find a lot of people would, I mean, the mythology around sticks is Ireland, of course. There's lots of mythology around sticks. So the mythology around the sticks was linked again to another part of it. So you had where they're being made, they would use magpie's blood to stain the stick because it's seen as magical and protective. You would have they would butter them, so they would get a stick, they would dry it, they would smear it in butter, and they'd put it up on the chimney. So inside the chimney, you would have a ledge, and they would be put on there to harden, and the butter would blacken them. Um, you would never use whitethorn because whitethorn is believed if it cuts you, it won't cure. So you'll have like a permanent bleeding mark. And I used to think that was a load of you know what. until I spoke to a lady who was telling me about a friend who'd cut herself on the whitethorn, and it took ages to heal because whitethorn's got a anticoagulant in it or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there is a whole history and whole mythology around sticks. You know, certain times of year you cut sticks, sometimes you don't. When certain times of the year when the tree is, I think it's when the tree is flowering, you don't cut it. It's only in the wintertime when the tree is stop flowering is dormant, then you can cut it. I think I'm not a stick maker, I'm a stick swinger. So these are history bits that I've picked up. But yeah, it's very fascinating, the whole history relation to it. The stick in Irish culture has been around for millennia. If you look at one of the major figures from the Tuatha Danann, which is the Dagda, who was one of the main gods in Celtic mythology, and he had a stick, funny enough, and a stick that one end would hit and he would kill you, and then the other end he would hit and bring you back to life. And it would produce food. It was like a magical stick. So, and he had a massive cauldron as well. So, sticks have always been very popular in Irish mythology. And again, this would link to like Celtic fights, like not everybody could afford like metal. It's like people looking at a picture of you stood for a Maserati in 100 years ago. Yeah, everybody had Maseratis. Everybody, like, they didn't. Um, they didn't have chainmail. The normal working Celt wouldn't have had chainmail. He'd have had a sword, maybe a family sword, or there would have been sword between the family. So like going back to practicing with it, you're not going to give it to your 12-year-old out in the field to cut hedges. You're going to let him out with a shillelagh and he can batter the hell out of that because you'll make another one. And I believe that shillelaghs were used in battle as well, as we from the Harry and stuff like that. So yeah, it's fascinating history.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's amazing how I find it amazing anyway, and always interesting how like ancient old knowledge, like about the white thorn as opposed to the black thorn and staying away from the white thorn, and like that knowledge kind of gets baked into the mythology,
Yeah,
and it becomes, it's a taboo to use that kind of wood because, there's this magical property about it. Well, it's not magical. It's there's something to it. There's some scientific reason why the cuts don't heal as quickly, that kind of thing, right? Or you bleed more if you get hit with
absolutely.
those, right? So yeah,
Uh,
these things are always really interesting, and the I guess the traditions around magic wands and things like that. Well, what is a wand but a stick, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. I think a lot of it as well is the parents telling the children, look, right, don't go near this tree because right, well, and we have the fairy trees in Ireland. And again, fairy trees. Have you heard of fairy trees?
yeah. There's that tradition came across the Atlantic as well. So yeah, I'm aware.
Okay, well, in Ireland we have fairy trees, and there's a great man called Eddie Lenahan, who is a great storyteller. If you get a chance, if you listen to a podcast, his podcast is brilliant. His research is amazing. He's been doing it for since the 70s, 60s, and 70s. He's been recording stories. And there was a fairy tree going to be cut down. Farmers won't cut down fairy trees in Ireland. They won't. Even today, there's that belief, look, don't cut it down because it'll bring you bad luck.
Yeah,
And you'll hear no end of stories of people who cut it down, and then all the guys who cut it down and died, and they sold the wood to your man, and he died, and his dog died, and then the cat he fell over, and all this stuff. You'll hear these stories, but it's based on truth. It's based on a kind of that tree's provided us with sticks for generations. Leave it alone. So yeah, fairy trees. Again, fairy trees are blackthorn and whitethorn. Where the two of them meet becomes what's called a fairy portal, or it's an access to the other world. So again, this is another reason they're left alone, because the fairies, although not as prominent as they were in Irish culture, are still there, in people's minds. Very much like Iceland, you go there and you hear of the trolls and stuff. Leave the
yeah.
trolls alone, you know. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's a uniqueness that we have in our culture, which we should hang on to forever.
If we could go back, I guess a bit about more of the characteristics of the Doyle style of Irish stick fighting. 'Cause you mentioned there are different styles, right? There's one-handed, there's two-handed, there's two stick. You'd mentioned as well. Um, you know, is there a particular advantage to having a two-handed system like the Doyles were, or was that mainly specific to the function of the defending the whiskey stills and the like, or
Yeah,
is
well,
there an inherent benefit to using two hands instead of more like a fencing style?
with the two hands, you're in closer. So the whole
Right.
idea is to shut down your opponent. And with the Doyle system, what we do is when they throw the stick, we intend to block the hand, not the weapon. So if they swing to us, they come in to hit us, however they come in. So a lot of the traditional styles in Irish stick, you will find styles that would have the stick up here
Mhm.
in such, and it'll be up like so. I've never done this style, so this is going to be completely incorrect, and people will tell me off. And a lot of times it would be about reaching in and getting the person. With the Doyle style, they counteracted that. So the intention was to block the weapon and use the weapon against the opponent. So if they swing the weapon in, you will crush the hand and then enter into the body. So you shut them down. So the two hands will allow you to get closer in. Doyle is the history of it is very pugilistic. So you'll have fencing mixed with boxing, so traditional Irish stick fencing mixed in with boxing style. So it's a very pugilistic kind of getting in close and punching in and punching. I'll give you a little demonstration. So if you look at when we would stand, maybe Schleys fell on the floor. When we would stand like so. Okay. Now the reason is nothing goes beyond the stick. So if I'm here about to fight with Bob, all my body's behind my shield. My stick is my sword and my shield.
Yeah.
Right. So when I would get in, so we look at blocking. If I was blocking, I would come in, I would block. But the block wouldn't just be for the weapon. See the arm here, I would get in close into this position, holding the elbow in place, attacking the arm, and then moving into the body and attacking the body. Yeah. So it would be very much like we would use one-handed entry as well. So this is called jump stick, meaning that from this position, I would jump the stick. Because my hands are so far forward, here, their temptation would be to break my hand. Yeah, they would attack my hand with their weapon. So I jump the stick, and then if I move with that jump, it means I get inside the weapon and get close in.
So you're
When we look,
drawing the attack by putting your hands out as almost like a target, right?
yeah, exactly, kinda, yeah. We'd also use one-handed entry, but this would be used if I was blocking here, so I can punch here and then enter in here. Yeah. So the whole process would be if he swings the weapon, I'm entering to attack the hand. I can also punch with the stick or I punch with my hand. So it doesn't, it's two-handed, but it can change. And traditionally with the fights, a lot of the doors would go in like this and then drop to this because this would tell you, oh, look, I'm one of you. Well, actually, I'm not. I'm very different. And it's all part of the sneakiness of stick fighting. Stick fighting has some wonderful little bits hidden, especially the Doyle system. With the punching, so again, pugilistic. If I was punching here, I'd punch with the stick outwards. So all I'm doing is throwing a punch, but I'm cocking the wrist here. This allows me to punch out and the stick will bounce off my arm and come back to me. Okay?
So
So
you're extending your arm just by
yeah, I'm just throwing a
backhand
punch.
movement.
But that's just a punch. So here would be there's one punch. So the stick, the heavy part of the stick is always on the left-hand side. And the reason it's on the left-hand side is because when I punch, this is the lightest punch. This is just a jab. But I'm punching with the heaviest part of the stick. If I wanted to, then I could repeat that. Because if you look at the kind of spring motion, this punches out, it hits my forearm, it comes back. So if I use this other hand, I can do two punches very quickly. Okay. And the height difference, I can punch low, punch high. High, low, it doesn't matter. So this would be for entry. This would be to take the brain, as we say. When you punch someone, they get the flashlight or the bulb goes off in their brain, and they're like, "Oh, crap, that hurt," and then I'd enter in. And this is what it's all about. It's taking the brain, taking the thought process out of it for him, and finishing him. It's very like we always say, better to have 5 punches than 5 minutes of fighting. If I hit him
That's
5 times and he goes down, great. I don't want to spend 5 minutes because I'm old and I'm fat now. I'm not going to last 5 minutes with this guy if he's 22 or something and full of roids. But 5 blows and he's going to be down.
So what kind of targeting then is focused on? You mentioned the hands would be a target, right? Which is common.
Well, my hands would be a target. We would focus on um, basically any of it. Any point that we could get, we would take. But the initial punch, this punch, is to the nose. We call this the line of nose. So when I punch out, my nose, there's a line between the stick and my nose, and that's where the stick will finish. So when I punch, I would punch the nose with the intention of watering the eyes and having him blind for a minute or so when I enter in and finish. Any target, we would use the kind of any of it. The hands, the ribs, we love the ribs, the knees, anything that's you'd break the foundation, the house falls down. So we would take out the knees. We would use kicks. So we'd use low line kicks. So the kicks would come in like so, and these are called log kicks. So this would be, imagine a log on a piece of rope and I swing it in. It would be here, boom. And the intention is to attack the shin. When I attack the shin, I drive the shin back, and then I would drop my body weight onto it this way with the intention of pushing the knee through, right? Or sliding down the shin and trying to take the flesh on the shin. Originally, they used to use hobnail boots. So when they hit the shin, the strike would come up the shin. I would hit the shin, take the skin on the shin as I go up. Then I would push my body, just drop my body weight through the shin. So if I break the knee, great. If I don't, I would then end up on the foot. Or I grab the foot and I punch them. They go down and we take the knee. So it's very old school fighting. It's not, it's not about points. It's about pain.
Yeah.
So it's a very ancient system, but it's very practical, and this has all come from years of use. People using it to defend themselves and their family. Yeah, and it's still very relevant today.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. So you showed like that kick, which would almost be, I think some Japanese styles refer to it as almost like an ashibarai, like a sweeping kick or a strike that way, or a fumikomi, I guess that would be more of a stomping, kind of stomping into the leg. Um, are there other, like you showed a punch, a straight punch after you parry off, you come back in to a punch to the head.
yeah,
Um, other types of techniques that would be associated with this
yeah,
specific style.
yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to give too many secrets away. If we
No,
look at the
I'll have to pay you for those.
well, we would of course call the hatchet, and the hatchet would be from here. If I imagine that arm's coming in, so he's swinging in to punch me, so I create distance by turning my body, dropping, and then I punch under the chin here.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is one of our specialities. We'd also come in close. So if we look at entering in, you do what's called dig for your dinner, where we're entering and breaking the rib cage or the central part of the body. And here, this would be punching into the wrist, but I'm not just punching with a stick. I'll be punching with my hip. So it's like a shovel hook coming in.
yeah,
One,
yeah,
two, three, four. But this would also be blocking. So everything is everything. If I look at that entry here, that punch, we just stop it for a minute. Look at the angle of the stick compared to his arm. So if I get in and he punches me, I'm blocking him here. There, I can block this side and punch in as well. So I'm attacking the core of the body, but also protecting myself as I do it. You know, if we look at thrashing, so thrashing is for distance. It's for the great concept of Irish stick fighting. One of the things are like a thrash would be that. So I thrash the stick out, and what am I doing? Well, I'm clearing the weapon. So clear the weapon, log kick. You know what I mean? Here, going across the eye line would be for someone who's approaching me. So saying for this guy, he's coming at me. I thrust across the eye line to get him to move back, which would then open him up to me to coming in.
yeah.
So that thrash, there's a log kick that I'm in, and I what's called bust the anthill. So there's the anthill. When I bust it, all the red ants run out. So the intention is to punch here, break the nose, but also open punch here to collapse the chest. So some of the great concepts of it, it's designed to fight multiple people. It's not about one-on-one, but it can be one-on-one if you need to be. It's always about attacking him, thinking about him, thinking about him, thinking about other people around me. And I'm positioning myself in a way I can finish him quickly to get on to the next guy. Because it's faction fighting, and that's what we used to do.
Yeah. Yeah, very functional in a melee, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And as you get older, walking with a walking stick, it doesn't matter if you need it or not. You're at that age, people tend to question you. I mean, the mad thing, I can go into a bank with this, which is shillelagh. Nobody's going to pass any marks on it.
Yeah,
I walk in with a Judo, which is like, oh my God, he's got a weapon.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the
so
shorter one almost even looks like it's about the same size like a tomahawk would be, right? So that would be, very similar kind of a function, I would assume. Maybe you don't
yeah,
throw it so much, but yeah, would
well,
certainly.
weirdly, when I taught in Cyprus, their shepherds have the same length weapon, protecting the sheep from wolves, but they'll also use it to throw, so they can throw and use it to hit something or somebody. You know, we wouldn't do that in Irish culture because the stick take too long to make.
Yeah, yeah, they're not expendable, I guess. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you're not going to throw away your 300 euros shillelagh, you
No,
know.
not on purpose anyway.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
are you familiar with the other different styles? Like, yeah, I was able to find in Canada, there's no currently, there's no that I'm aware of anyway, no Doyle schools or instruction that's happening in Canada. But I was
There,
able to find one it's referring to itself as Antrim Bata.
yeah, Antrim
And I
Batty,
believe
yeah.
that's the Ramsey family line that's associated with. I'm not sure who the instructor is and so on, but and what the connection is, if there's any. But
Well, it's from Max Coulthard. Max teaches that. And again, when I said earlier about the stick being higher up here, this is Antrim. I'm not doing them justice because I've never done Antrim, so I don't want to. But it's the idea of holding the weapon up here and fighting from this position.
right,
You also had, I mentioned it, the sort of the storyteller who was telling us about the two-handed stick fighters from,
yeah,
in Ireland you have, you go 10 miles down the road, somebody speaks with a different language, different accent.
yeah, yeah,
Initially, the Irish language would have been different. So if you go around Ireland, the language is different in every, it's close, but it's not the same.
yeah.
Um, and it would have been the same with stick fighting because you'd have had different families, different lineage. We're Doyles because the Doyle family were the head of our faction, and they would have been their family style that we've learned. But you'd have had other families and other factions, and these were all kept very close into the family because or within the faction. So you wouldn't teach somebody outside the faction; it would be kept within your faction.
Hmm.
Saying that, though, you had professional stick teachers who used to travel around to different areas teaching stick fighting in the old days. And weirdly, like if you read a lot of the old newspaper reports on it, they would say how martial the Irish were because they would practice every day. Because, like yourself in a martial art, if you don't practice every day, then everyone else around you gets quicker or better, and your techniques become sloppy. So that's another reason why people did it. Yeah, and it was for pride of the faction, pride of your family. So you're representing your family when you're out there fighting. So, you had to be good.
So with the Doyle style, obviously it's a single stick system,
Yeah.
two-handed.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about, without giving away any secrets, obviously, but or any more than you've already given, um, about the methodology in which it's taught? Like, is it a progressive levels? Like, you have belt levels in a lot of Asian martial arts, and so on. How is this one structured?
Well, I've changed it slightly. When I became chieftain, well, before I became chieftain, I started teaching on Zoom. When COVID hit, I was teaching a small club in near Enniskillen here, and all my classes were in person. When COVID hit, that's when we started teaching online, and that really improved it. So we started looking at grading people. I always have the grades of level one, two, three, and four. And four is coach, and five is instructor. So level four coach, level one, two, and three would be students' grades, where they would progress from, like, you have got generational moves. You've got first generation blocking, first generation stepping, first generation movements, which would then move on to second generation. So level one would be first generation, second generation, third generation, and fourth generation would be the grades. And coach would be like an assistant instructor kind of thing, where they can teach, where they've got an instructor or they've got someone who's looking after them. And an instructor will be level five, and that'll be someone who's done minimum of 2 years, really, because it's going to take you a year and a bit to get to four, and then you've got to break a year between four and five. And this is to the reason I done that was to make sure that people stuck with the system. There's a lot of people in the world who go and get black belts and then don't do the martial art.
Yeah, they collect them. Yeah, move on. Yeah.
And that was my fear with this. I met a few people at the start who came and trained with me, but it was about collecting the grades rather than actually doing the martial art.
Yeah.
And to me, my job as the chief is to educate people and spread the word. I don't want the system to disappear and die. I want this to go because it's such a practical martial art. I want it to go everywhere. I want it to be in every hall in Ireland. I want all around the world, every hall. Like karate used to be, everywhere you went, there's a karate club,
Yeah.
a taekwondo club, a judo club. But now, everything's changed in the martial arts. And the thing is, I want good quality people. So the tests are hard, but they're not silly hard. They're fun as well. I teach very differently to a lot of people in that I see it as there's a lot of technical ability, but I also make it fun. I want the person to have a laugh because in Irish culture, everything's kind of like that. There's no, we're not a Japanese dojo. We're a group of people getting together, knock the crap out of each other with sticks. So we're having fun doing it. And I find if people have fun, they want to come back, but they learn a lot quicker,
Yeah.
you know. Which, I'm not saying it's disrespectful in any way, but we do it. It's still a hard workout, but it's a fun workout, you know. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Back to the grades. So I digress again. So the grades are one, level two, level three, and then level three to four is kind of the coaching, and level fours can start teaching. They can start a club. They can give them their own faction name, but they can only grade to level two with the intention of, okay, now we're going to take the level threes, we're going to make them better, so we can keep the quality of the system, right? Because we have grown exponentially around the world. So it's trying to keep control of it. So it's not a pay per play kind of thing. It's a pay. You work hard, you work your ass off, and you get it. And it's about preserving the culture.
Yeah. So the system, by the sound of it, it's the way that it's currently being taught. You can, it's a, I'm going to be careful how I say this, but it's, it can be learned fairly quickly, I guess, is what I'm gathering. When I say fairly quickly, like you say, within a couple of years, you're reaching
Yeah.
the level four and then, or whatever, right? So, and then you have another year where it's, you're kind of honing the craft and showing your commitment to it before you get to the next level.
But
Um,
also, it's like all martial arts, so it's very personal. So some people will do it, and again, depends on the student. Some people do it, and it might take them 4 years to get to coach level. It might
right.
take them. So it's not a complicated system in the sense. It's just as the more you learn, the more complicated it becomes because you start to see things within
Yeah.
it. There's a lot of hidden stuff in it which is beautifully hidden. So it's not overly complicated, and if you work hard, you can do it. I mean, I run a coaching class once a year in Ireland where you spend 6 days training intensively to get to coach. Now, not everybody passes. It's not a turn up, give you money and edge. It's you turn up, you work your ass off,
Right.
and if you get to the end and you pass the grading, then you're still supported by the system. So we have people that people come and train with me who've done that course just to keep themselves sharp, It's not a massively big system, that's what I'm saying. The basics, once you get the basics off, it's pretty fun. You know, it's very hard to quantify it. I mean, we have in the two dances we have, was it 68 moves in the two dances. So from beginning from one long form, the Rinka Hain and the Rinka Do. So the first dance you go up so far, and in the second dance you finish off at the end, and that would be in total of 68 moves. You call it a kata, but we would look at that and as our dance, and that we would do the dance, and then that would be it. And it seems to go really quickly. You don't realize how many moves you're doing, but each move is different. Some are similar, but the similarity might be just a slight variation on the angle, or the closeness of one you would, like we call Bassiante, we would step in and punch, so we're punching through them. The other hand, we would just turn and punch. So yeah, very much very similar, but that would be it wouldn't be like we're gonna do, let's do like, we only do 10 moves. We don't, we do, there's a fair few in it. But yeah,
Yeah,
I've never counted them, and I wouldn't quantify it because I don't think it's limited. I don't think there's limiting to it. I think there is, it's unending, which I like to
yeah.
think it is.
So the dances you mentioned, the two dances, are they a relatively modern addition, or has that always been?
That's how people trained. So the dance, the rinka, would be like I said to you earlier, the people would watch people doing the rinka, the police or the soldiers would look at them doing the rinka and ask what they're doing and say the rinka and bahanesh the dance of the whiskey stick.
Mhm.
And they would go, oh yeah, look at the Irish English dictionary. Oh, it's just Morris dancing. But actually it's the form and it's a way of they taught to remember it. Because Irish dancing is very, very a big part of the system, the dancing. Not that we're dancing, but the dance is the movements. When I went down I was invited down to Limerick to the University of Galway, and they do a County Limerick. They do a an Irish dancing program, and it's a professional system where people come from all over the world to learn Irish dancing, but in a degree status. And there was two ladies down there, and one young lady she's only about this tall, and I was showing her the kicking that we do in relation because Irish dancing, the hands are by the side and the legs are up in the air.
Yeah,
And holy crap, when she kicked me, I thought I was going to die. She kicked my legs. Well, she's a professional dancer. She kicks all the time, and they
yeah,
were beautiful. And she went for this very sort of demure, shy little thing to an absolute psychotic killer. She was really enjoying the kicking, and it was just shown that the dance, the steps of the dance, were again linked into the cultural dancing. You know, um, there are sort of people say, oh, well, that's a way of training people to kick and stuff. But I don't know. I'm not an expert on dancing, so I don't know. Is the answer. But yeah, the rinka, the dance, the rinka, hey, rinka do, first dance, second dance. So it just becomes the rinka where the whole thing dances through.
yeah. So you could
Yeah,
practice it in plain sight, essentially. So, yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah. So
exactly.
it's very similar to the Okinawan, traditional Okinawan dances and so on. They would do the same. And I believe
Yeah,
capoeira is another example, similar, in plain sight. You're practicing the art, but you're dancing, if you
dance.
will. Yeah.
You could put it to music and dance. It's not. It doesn't look like a dance, to be honest with you. But when you're dancing, when you're doing it, that's what you call it the rinka to remind you of the dance,
Mm,
and it's a way of remembering. And this is how people did it many years ago. The Chinese and Japanese didn't invent it; other people did it before them, as well.
yeah.
You
Well,
know.
it seems like a very practical way to, keep up the skill set. Yeah. I'm curious now about, so we've gone into, I guess, an overview of your martial arts career and particularly a bit of a deep dive into the Doyle stick fighting system. Do you have any prominent eureka moments that have kind of popped into your head as you were, whether it was judo or aikido or Wing Chun or this, um, that suddenly everything made, suddenly a whole bunch of things made sense, or suddenly you figured out, oh, I can do it this way now, and it's
Yeah,
it makes more sense to you. Have you had many or any of those that you could speak to?
very, very much. Uh, I mean, I train in Irish stick every day. I teach every day. So a lot of times I'll be doing something and you'll get a moment you go, oh, that will fit in with this. Or, you'll get a movement and you'll go, well, actually, we have a thing called gunpowder in Irish stick where we're using the sort of body's motion or the tension of the body. So we would wind on the stick onto the hip, which would allow us to throw the stick, or I mean, throw the stick as in thrash the stick or hit them. So many times you'll find that there'll be aspects of that you use, and your brain will go, "Oh man, that's just," and it's. I'm very lucky; it happens all the time. It's constant flow of. So yes, I get it all the time, and I love it. It's because I think it would be very boring if I got to a point where you just same flat motion every day
Yeah.
with Irish. It's very much this staircase going up because you're growing all the time and seeing new things all the time, you know. And so there's lots of eureka moments.
How about between the different arts or systems that you've trained? So, Aikido is probably the most the one you invested the most time doing prior to this. Um, are there similarities that you've kind of or connections that you've made that you normally otherwise you would not have known of had you
Well,
not done the training?
in my Aikido, man, you're talking about 20 years ago now. So
But it's
there's
all in there though. Like it's not just the mindset, right? Like I'm sure um, I'm sure it's still there, right? So I'm sure there are connections that are subconsciously at least being made between, oh, I'm
yeah,
doing this now. Oh, this is just like when I used to do
yeah,
whatever,
similarities.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because your human body only moves so many ways. And we're lucky to have four limbs, so those four limbs will only step and move so many different ways. So yeah, there are similarities I've come up against. One of the guys I teach in Belfast or Lurgan, he's a Wing Chun Sifu, and he calls Irish stick Wing Chun with a shillelagh because of the movements, because we're getting in and we're taking them out, and it's a real compliment, that he recognizes that. Um, but it's again, there is that, like say, eureka moments where I will see similarities in various different things. There are things that in the Japanese martial arts that I've done that I want to do something and I go, well, actually, I can't do that. That's not part of Irish stick. Glenn would say that, Irish stick is like Lego. You can pick bits from here and there all through the system. But if you draw something in, you bring it in stickle bricks. Is it stickle bricks you guys have? They don't fit together, or
Sticker
Duplo
bricks?
blocks or whatever. Stickle bricks might be new. Yeah,
Not
it kind
familiar with that term. No, sorry.
might be Duplo blocks or
Duplo
um,
or Legos, and yeah, we have those. Yeah,
so they don't fit together. They're a different system. And so you sometimes have to be wary of that. I'll think, well, I could get in and do, an osotogari, and you go, actually, no, that's not Irish stick. There is a variation we do the osotogari, but it's not osotogari. It's the third generation log kick. So we would not use because my body's a different position because I've got a weapon in my hand. So there are similarities, and there are similarities I have to watch out for that I go, no, I'm not adding in because that's not part of Irish stick. That's something else. So that stays out.
right.
Um, so eureka, non-eureka.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here. Okay, so here's something interesting then. So if you remember something or experience something that's not part of the traditional Irish stick system, but maybe there's a small efficiency that can be gained by doing it in a different way. Like you mentioned, Osotogari. In my mind, that's a big movement, right? Like, but maybe there's a variation on that that's a little smaller that would work really well for that. Would you consider amending the tradition?
No,
No,
because I'm the chieftain, my job is to preserve the system.
right.
So I preserve it, and it's like, you know, doing karate and then going, right, I'm going to bring in, a kung fu sweep, and you go, well, that's a kung fu sweep. It's not, and they're very similar. Everything is very similar. Everything's linked. Like I say, we only move so many ways. But no, I won't because my job is my job and my kind of whole life is about protecting the system,
Hmm.
promoting and so I won't bring in something that is not in the system because it wouldn't be Irish stick anymore. It wouldn't be rink. It wouldn't be the you know the the Doyle system anymore. It would be the Doyle system with a bit of judo, with a bit of Aikido, and I won't do that. There are
The Leddy
similarities.
system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The world today is very, how can I say it, knowledgeable place. If you want to find some information and stuff, you pick up the computer and you have it within seconds, and you can find out different techniques and stuff. But part of that sort of part of sort of being the honor of being in the position I am is you preserve it as it is,
Yeah.
and I would never think of adding anything to it because then it wouldn't be Irish stick anymore. It would be, wing stick or Jew shillelagh. You know, it wouldn't be as it was. And that's my privilege to do that. So I do that to keep it as it is.
Very, very good. Um, One thing I meant to ask you previously, you talked about the training and, how it's kind of, it's hard work, but it's a laugh and because you're hitting each other and all that kind of stuff. And then you go, have a pint or whatever afterwards. Do you do free sparring in your system?
Yes, we some of us do, some of us don't. Some of the clubs don't do it, but we do it every now and then. We will kit up and we'll use a padded stick to fight
So
because people
you
have
you
got.
do use a padded stick. Okay, yeah, because I
Yeah,
didn't know if
yeah.
you would just use like a equivalent to the Japanese bogu kind of thing that protects your torso and your head and stuff like that. But
No. We use we've got fencing. Oh, no point, you probably can't see it. Got fencing helmets we use, and we use arm protectors. We got shin guards we use, and we'll use a padded shillelagh. And then gloves. So when the guys want to go a bit crazy, they can go in there and actually test themselves out a bit.
without
Um,
breaking fingers so much, yeah,
yeah, well, there are certain stuff we won't do because there are moves that we kind of regulate out of that because they're designed to hurt people. And I don't mean that kind of like we don't hurt each other. I mean that we can get that move in and we know where to put that move in, but you know that you're not going to do that move because that's your friend you're trading with. You'll leave with some bruises and a bit of a battering and maybe some ringing in your head, but you'll leave happy. You won't go away going, I'm hurt now and I can't work tomorrow. We don't do that. It's about the faction. We respect each other. We're like a family, so we look after each other. Every faction in the world is all one big faction. And when I say faction, some people go, but it's not. We all look at it's like every karate club in the world. Everybody is as a karateka. You all respect each other. You all look after each other, and we're the same. And we will you know, I've guys at the club that come train with, and they come and fix my lawnmower, or they cut down a tree for me, or because we're friends, and that's what
yeah,
martial arts is. It's
yeah,
making friends. It should be. So yeah, we do. We don't do competitions yet. My plan is to start competition in the next year or so, um, with the goal of holding the World Championships in Ireland. Um, but it's going to be a slow process getting in. Some people like it, some people don't. I don't make it obligatory. I think it's down for everyone to do what they want to do. I mean, I have members who are in their 80s. I don't think they're going into competitions. But I have people that are sort of 18, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20. They want to fight. So great, off you go. You know, go in the middle, have fun. You know.
yeah. And this would be like a competition within the Doyle style, or would you open it up to other?
No, within our own style, we would
Just
be
your own?
within
Okay,
our factions together.
yeah,
And the hope is that when we'll get an American faction, we'll get an Irish faction, we'll have European factions, we'll all meet together and have a competition, and it'll be pints afterwards, it'll just be good fun.
yeah,
Uh, the thing is, I stay away from politics. I don't tolerate politics. Um, luckily we've got some decent people. Um, but what I like to do is make sure that when someone is starting training with me and they're looking up, I say, I don't do politics, no politics in our martial art. And everyone says that. And what I say to him is quite simply, if you start anything, you're out. There's no kind of, oh, no, we don't do any of that shit. Excuse my French. It's about preserving the martial art and having fun and looking after each other. I'm not interested in people who want to, you always find the people who are into politics, the ones that want to grade off the mat. I found in my martial arts journey, somebody wants a fifth dan. Well, I'll get it off the mat and I'll look after sensei and I'll do it. And you're like, no, this dude, just get out there and do it.
Yeah.
Uh, so we're inclusive. We look after everybody. We don't care about sex. We don't care about religion. Being in Ireland, you've had a long history of religious division, and we don't tolerate that. It's you walk into that fight. I don't care what religion you are. You treat everyone with respect, and we have fun. So yeah, that's our future.
So, do you have a favorite or most important concept that kind of is central to your approach to teaching, to practice, to training?
My concept is that we're open to everybody. A lot of martial arts close the door at people at a certain age, or have certain disabilities, or a certain sexual preference, or certain religious beliefs. We don't do that.
Mm,
I believe human beings are human beings, and as long as my concept is that Irish stick is for everybody. It doesn't matter of age, even certain disabilities. We're going to try and incorporate and help. I believe that there isn't anybody I haven't met that I can't teach, which sounds really big-headed. Um, but what I like to do is, if someone can stand, I will pick up a stick, then I will help them as much as I can, and I will find a way. Because I was taught that by Glenn, there's always a way around it. Um, and there's not yourself, you know yourself in competition or techniques training when you're teaching somebody, some people can do things that other people can't and just naturally gifted. And there are times when people just can't do anything because they can't do that. They physically can't do it. So my concept would be that it's open to everybody, and we have to find a way for them to do it that it works for them. Like I do introduction lessons to people that come along who want to learn it, and my belief is if they can walk away with three things that'll help them defend themselves in the future, then I'm doing a great job. And that's what it's about. It's about helping. It's better to be helpful in society than be a hindrance, and that's what we want to be. A lot of my members are in there, are over the 40 limit, and 40 age limit. And to me, there's some really good fighters out there. A lot of martial arts, when you get to a certain age, it's like, nah, you go sit down in the corner, grandpa. You make the tea, we'll be out in a minute. Irish stick is like that, we train everybody and we train them
yeah,
to their ability. So my concept is that Irish stick's for everybody,
for everyone.
you
Good.
know.
Well, I think the fact that it's in a relatively short period of time, the late 1990s and so on, 20 odd years, it's spread everywhere. So I think that's a testament to that. And again, forgive me for missing, Prague and the other places at the beginning when I was listing off where
Right.
everything was, where you can find it all. Again, I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope it's not the last time we speak because I'm really genuinely interested in this. And if you make your way to the Toronto area, I will certainly, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to meet up with you, and or if you're going to be doing any kind of training sessions, I'd be interested in checking it out as well. Um,
Awesome.
and before we sign off, is there anything that you wanted to add that we haven't covered off already, or even something as simple as where can people find you if they're interested?
Well, for all you Canadian peeps out there, I'm actually doing a seminar in Albany in upstate New York in August, the 2nd and 3rd. If you reach out to me at www.irishstick.com, and we have a website there where you can find instructors, coaches, and you can reach out to us if you want information. I also do Zoom lessons, so if you want to learn that way, because I know that geographically, it's very hard to get certain places,
Mhm.
because I always forget how massive Canada and America are. Every time I go over, look at the map, and when I first came to Toronto, I looked at the map and I was like, "Hey, there's Toronto," and Glenn was in Milton. And I was like, oh man, that's like 10 minutes. It was an hour and a half. We're like, oh my God, this is massive. This is mental. And getting quotes from taxis of like 1,000 something dollars for traveling from there to there. I'm like, there. they're taking the Michael, but actually, they were right. They were. It's a very long way. So if you want, if you're interested, just reach out to us. We have teachers across America at the moment. We've got a good few both on the East Coast and the West Coast. We need to get some people in Canada. There are some people in Canada who train with Glen, but they're very quiet at the moment. So um, you might be, if you're looking, put a message out like on Facebook or anything like that. There might be some people around. But yeah, hopefully coming to Canada in the future. I really look forward to it. So, and thank you so much, Charles, for having me. It's been a real pleasure to be here. And thank you for letting me chat on and bore people about Irish stick fighting. Uh, you're all very welcome to reach out to me. And if there's anything today, I'm on Facebook. My name is Bernard Leddy. You'll see me because there's a black picture and there's me throwing a stick, so you can't miss it. And thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Pleasure's been mine. And I'll put your when I post this online, I'll put your URL for your website
Brilliant.
in the comments area for or in the information for around the video. And
I'll put my email address there as well. So I'll
oh,
send you.
perfect. Yeah, yeah. I can put both of that there. So yeah, no, I think this. I don't think you bored anybody. I certainly wasn't bored, and I'm doing this for me anyways. It's this is not a
Nah,
business; it's a passion project. So I'm doing it because I love to do it, and I really enjoyed this. Learned a lot of things over the last little bit just preparing for this discussion, and learned several more things today from you. So appreciate your time and you're agreeing to do this. So and again, sincerely, I hope we do cross paths either like this or in person, even better at some point in the future. I'd be really enjoy, I think, meeting you in person.
yeah.
So
Me too, Charles. Thank you so much.
all right, thank you very much.